All right, today we are jumping into an ancient puzzle, one that's been hiding in plain sight right in the middle of the Hebrew Bible. It's a literary mystery that, honestly, reveals two incredibly profound ways of seeing the world.
And that puzzle starts with a really good question. If you've ever read through the Bible, you know this feeling. You get through the books of Samuel and Kings, this huge, sprawling history of Israel's monarchy, only to turn the page and find, well, the same story all over again in Chronicles. And you kind of think, wait, is this a typo? No, it's not a mistake, it's a message.
You see, on the one hand, you've got the books of Kings. They read like this gritty, political history of one failure after another. But then you have Chronicles, a retelling that is almost completely focused on the theme of worship. We're talking two tellings of the same history, but with two completely different vibes.
So what is going on here? Well, both sets of books cover the exact same historical period, the rise and, the dramatic fall of Israel's kings. The key is, they were written at very different times, for very different audiences, and with completely different goals in mind. And this, right here, this is the crucial point. These aren't contradictions. It's better to think of them as two complementary lenses. Each one brings a different part of the picture into sharp focus, offering really unique lessons about faith and failure and identity. So let's look through that first lens.
First up, the books of Kings. Now this is the story of a nation's slow-motion collapse. It's a political drama, just packed with flawed leaders and terrible decisions. But underneath all that mess, the author is making this incredibly deep theological point about one thing: sovereignty.
Sovereignty. It's this kind of wild idea that God is in charge of it all, and not just in the quiet, holy moments. We're talking about in the chaos of politics, in the boardroom, behind the scenes of history itself. It's this belief that even when everything looks like it's completely out of control, there's a steady hand still guiding the story.
And boy, does the author of Kings give us the perfect test case for this idea. We're talking about 500 relentless years. Across more than 40 kings, the final verdict is almost total failure. The entire project of having a human king, it just flat out didn't work.
And the source material really doesn't pull any punches here. It basically argues that the whole experiment in monarchy, that demand to have a king like all the other nations, was just a catastrophic mistake right from the get-go.
So that begs the question, right? Why tell this long, kind of depressing story of human failure? I mean, if the whole thing was such a mess, what's the lesson? This is where the hidden genius of the book really shines.
You see, the story isn't actually about the king's failure. It's about God's unstoppable sovereignty in the middle of that failure. God's rule isn't some top-down force that just crushes free will. Instead, it's this quiet, persistent, often invisible force that works through the messy reality of our choices. He doesn't just discard flawed leaders, he works right through them to get his purposes done.
Okay, so let's switch to our second lens. About 100 years or so after Kings was written, a new author retells the same story in the book of Chronicles. But this time, the audience is a community in total crisis. These are people who have lost everything, and they're asking this fundamental question: who are we now? The context is just completely different. The author of Kings was writing to explain why the nation fell apart. But the author of Chronicles? He's writing to a scattered people, just returned from exile, surrounded by foreign powers, and they're trying to figure out how to be God's people without a king or a country in the way they used to know it. And the chronicler's answer is just brilliant. He rebuilds their entire history, but he doesn't focus on all the political drama. Nope. Instead, the backbone of his entire story is worship. He painstakingly details the temple, the priests and Levites who served in it, and even gives specific musical instructions for worship. For the chronicler, this is everything. A community's real identity isn't found in its political power, its military might, or its economic strength. It's found in the one thing they can actually control: how and who they worship. That is the unshakable foundation. And the author of Chronicles uses this really unique literary device right at the start of the book to drive this point home on a deeply, deeply personal level.
It starts with names. And I don't mean just a few. The book opens with 9 straight chapters of genealogies. Now, it can feel like a real slog to get through, but the author is making an incredibly powerful statement here. History, especially God's story, isn't about these big abstract forces or impersonal ideas. It's woven from the lives of individual people, every single one with a unique name and a unique story.
For a community that felt lost, that felt anonymous, this was a radical reminder. God knows your name. You are part of his story.
Okay, so we've got these two incredible parallel histories. One is focused on God's sovereignty in a really messy world. The other is all about finding our identity in worship. So why do we need both of them? What's the complete picture here?
Well, this table breaks it down perfectly. Kings focuses on political failure to answer the question, how does God rule? And the answer is sovereignly, even through our mess. Chronicles focuses on faithful worship to answer the question, who are we? And the answer there is, we are a people defined by our worship.
They're not fighting with each other, they're completing each other. You really need both of these lenses to get the full three-dimensional view of faith and life. One without the other, well, it just gives you an incomplete picture.
So, what does this all mean for us? Well, from Kings, we learn to trust in God's sovereignty, to see his hidden hand at work in our often chaotic world without giving in to cynicism. And from Chronicles, we learned that no matter what is happening politically or culturally, our core identity is anchored in the act of worship.
And that leaves us with one last question. These ancient texts asked it of their world, and they're absolutely asking it of us today. In our world, which is so full of flawed leaders and shifting identities, where do we find our foundation? These two stories suggest a powerful answer, a foundation built on a quiet trust in God's rule and a vibrant identity forged in worship.